Hello again everybody, and another talk today about festivals. We're staying with Greece, and we're moving away from the city Dionysia in Athens, but this time we're going to the Panathenaia. Now, if you wanted to see a religious festival from the ancient world, which was as much about celebrating a city as honouring the gods, then the Great Panathenaia of Athens was the one for you. This was a fabulous melange of athletics and music and horsemanship, even naval prowess. According to Plutarch, who was writing many centuries later, Theseus, the mythical Theseus it was who initiated the Panathenaia originally, and the purpose was to unite the various small towns and villages around Athens in a core identity of what it meant to be an Athenian. So thus the origin of the specific tribal competitions which occurred within the games. So what actually happened, and how did all this address that central political purpose? There's some debate, and the evidence is slightly contradictory about the actual day-to-day programme, but there's reasonable agreement about this. First of all, it lasted 8 days, so it was a hell of a festival. So at the end of that, then your body might well have taken quite a pounding from the celebrations. The first day was music competitions, and the first part of this was the rhapsodes. Now, the rhapsode is a thing peculiar to Greece, and it was basically performances of Homer. So you sang, and because Homer was all sung, you sang passages from the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it was about your performance and your variation on the performance of those two great poems. Interesting, the central place that Homer has already achieved by this time. There were also musical competitions. There was the kithara, which is a kind of a lyre, the aulos, a sort of double piped oboe maybe, sort of effect, and singing to the accompaniment of a lyre. Day 2 was boys and youths athletic competitions, and day 3 was men's athletics. So wrapping these all together, what was involved in these? Well, in the stadium there were running competitions. The word stadium, actually, the stadion in Greek, is actually a measurement of distance. It's just short of 200 meters. It's the length of a stadium, and that's why a stadium is called what it is. So there are running competitions. There are wrestling competitions. The Greco-Roman wrestling that happens in the Olympics these days is loosely speaking based, as far as we can tell, on ancient wrestling competitions in competitions like the Panathenaia and indeed the Olympic Games at Olympia. There were boxing competitions, and we know that boxers trained long and hard for this. They were held to be, a bit dim, all muscle, ate huge amounts, and had disproportionately large fists and small brains. There was the pentathlon competition, which is a sort of mixed competition, quite similar to modern pentathlon in the modern Olympics. And then there was the Pankration. Now, the Pankration was a hell of a competition, not unique to the Panathenaia, but it was an amazing business. There are only 2 rules. You're not allowed to bite, and you're not allowed to gouge somebody's eyes. And we know that judges stood over these bouts with sticks in order to part participants. It was tougher than any modern sport, tougher than mixed martial arts, tougher than rugby league. It was so tough that it sometimes ended in death, and that was an undesirable outcome, but one which was allowed for. Day 4, equestrian events. Chariot racing, throwing a javelin from horseback, and then eventually, later on day 7, you got a competition which was jumping off a horse and then jumping back on again while the horse was running along, called the apobates. The prizes for the equestrian competitions, interestingly, went to the owners, not to the jockeys. And so that's a little bit like modern racing, I guess. Day 5 was the tribal events, and this was a central part of it from an Athenian point of view. there was various sort of strength trials. There was a boat race at the Piraeus eventually on day 7, and there was a competition which was a sort of war dance where you danced to the accompaniment of pipes and drums probably. Now there's something, I don't know, it seems a bit fake about this to me. It's as if it's the Athenians evoking a mythical or perhaps invented past. Now many societies do this. Sometimes nations suffer a crisis of identity and invent a mythical past to give themselves a sense of national self-justification. An interesting question for Britain today: if we were to trace our mythical roots and celebrate them, I wonder what that would be. Would we trace our Celtic roots, our Roman roots, or Anglo-Saxon roots, or Viking roots, or Huguenot roots, or African roots, or Asian roots? There'd be an awful lot of roots that you could trace back to what it takes to be a Briton. So I wonder what those tribal games would involve. Cricket perhaps, boat races, drinking. Day 6 was an all-night event on the Acropolis prior to this, prior to a torch race for lighting the sacrificial flame. Must have been a massive honour to win the torch race, to light the sacrificial flame on the altar of Athene on the Acropolis. There's a lot of singing and dancing of youths and young women at this point too. There's a big procession on the 6th day, taking the sacred peplos probably to the Erechtheion. There may have been in the 5th century a second one which went to the statue of Athene Parthenos in the Parthenon, but certainly there was a peplos. And we know a mythologized or idealized version of what this looked like, because the continuous frieze on the Parthenon is set to illustrate that Panathenaia procession. And the idea was that you took a peplos sacred to Athena and redressed the statue. But the Athenians proclaimed on the Parthenon frieze, the participation and the attendance of the 12 Olympian gods at the presentation of the peplos. So nothing like bigging up your city by saying the gods consider it important enough to attend. On day 7, there were that was when the horse Apobates competition happened, and the boat race down at Piraeus, which is the harbour of Athens. On day 8, there was the prize giving. How did that unify the city? And anything we can learn from all that? Well, the centre point of all this was the Acropolis. A lot of the activities took place on the Acropolis. It's the most prominent point of the city. It's the sense of religious centre of the city. So making the gods and the Acropolis the centre of your celebrations, that's clearly a pretty powerful thing from a sort of iconographic point of view. The activities celebrate some of what it meant to be an Athenian, some of what the Athenians thought about themselves. But really it was only some of those qualities. Music, yes. Physical prowess, yes. Collective meal and sacrifices and involvement of citizens in a citizens-only competition, yes. But there's nothing about political debate there. There's nothing about theatre competitions, nothing about the philosophical tradition which was so powerful in Athens, certainly in the 5th century. And was certainly which Pericles, in the great funeral speech recorded by Thucydides, identified as essential Athenianness. So it's a partial celebration of what it meant to be an Athenian. I wonder where in Britain we would focus were we to invent something of the same kind. Where would be our principal focus? Would it be perhaps Westminster Abbey? Wembley Stadium maybe? Lord's Cricket Ground perhaps? And what do we think is important in Britain to tell to future generations? Now there is a real debate to be had.